Right, we'll try again. Welcome to the Licensing and Environmental Health Committee. My name is Richard Udall. I chair this committee. I have to read the annual the essay, which every member has to hear before the meeting starts. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making audio recording, and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Follow me. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signposted. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Have we got any appointments of substitutes? None. I've got apologies from Councillor Tor Pingree. Is that noted? It is. Any declarations of interest? There being none. And public participation?
Yes, Chair. Mr. Mohammed Sadad's here, speaking on tax licence matters.
Okay, over to you, sir.
Good evening, everybody, members. Hope you're well. First of all, St. Swithin Street in town, the slabs have come up on the one side in the middle of the road. There's about 8 to 9 slabs that have come up. So I was wondering if you could raise that matter with Highways for us or Ringway, whoever's done the work. I mean, it's poorly done there. Secondly, enforcement, I would appreciate it if you could come out at 11 at night till 4 in the morning, Friday and Saturday. It's a must. There's a lot of activity going on Friday and Saturday night. And I think even you councillors should come and have a look what's really going on in the city. The biggest main issue is WRS should have taken into account a long time ago. The reason I say this is because WRS are talking about passenger safety all the time. It's quite bad out there, really, because all the written off vehicles that were plated, you've given them temporary plates. I don't understand why, because alarm bells should have been ringing years ago. If these taxis were written off on their logbook and they were plated by yourselves, you should honour this, because for the life of the vehicle. But not just in Worcester, the whole region has got written off vehicles, not just privatisers, minibuses, the lot. They're all doing school contracts. So that is an offence itself. And children are at risk here. If that vehicle was written off first time round and they were paid out, second time round, they're involved in an accident and they're doing school runs, there's no guarantee those children are going to survive. The whole region is like this. Bromsgrove, Wychavon, Malvern, Evesham, Redditch, Kidderminster, the whole area has got written off vehicles. And they're all doing school contracts and they're earning a hell of a lot of money. So this, Chair, enforcement, this needs to be looked at thoroughly, because this is actually a serious offence here being committed by every single department out there. If County Hall are not aware of this practice taking place, then I'm afraid you guys are going to be held accountable. Because if County Hall are not aware that they're giving social services contracts out to these companies and they've employed, there's a lot of written off vehicles out there, be it private hire, the minibus guys, the middlemen here contracting the work out, and they're driving written off vehicles, minibuses. Hold on, that's on your heads, guys. You are solely responsible for that, because this is being overlooked for years. And I mean 10, 15 years. I've been taxing for 22 years. So, but the big main issue here is 67, 68 plated vehicles, their licenses have been suspended or they're on temporary plates. Now, hold on, you already granted them a license when they first came into the system 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 6 years. So you have to honour those vehicles. You have to grant them the license to the end of their life, be it 10 years or 12 years. Any vehicles that has done 10 years of their life, they shouldn't be allowed extension if they're written off vehicles. They should go and buy a new one. And that's the other thing. If these cars, these vehicles are doing school contracts, they're earning good money. from County Hall have given the budget out to the individual people who contract this work out, the whole structure needs to be looked at as if from tomorrow, because legally, the whole region has got dangerous vehicles out there, be it minibuses, be it private tyres, the whole cars, the whole region has got it. So I'm afraid you have to go to the drawing board, Chair, contact County Hall and have a look at every single logbook in the chain, be it 3,000-4,000 vehicles in the whole area, and you have to suspend them from January because this is about the safety of the public and the safety of the children, because they're all doing school contracts, and if they are all in written off vehicles, it's a big problem here, I'm afraid. It just doesn't exist in Worcester. The whole region it exists, and it's been overlooked by yourselves for a long time. And I'm afraid it's a serious matter now, because you have to go to the drawing board and do what's right. Individually, all you councillors have to decide what's right, not what you've decided an hour ago with your own parties. No, you have to do what's right for everybody, because it's the truth, because it's been overlooked for years. The whole area's got it. So I'm afraid I'll leave it to you. Thank you.
You've just concluded in time. I was just about to interrupt you. Thank you very much for keeping in time. I've heard all the comments you've made. There will be a notice made about the St. Swithin Street slabs. I haven't seen them myself, but we'll made a note of that, and something will be some action will be taken to make the county council aware. I can tell you about the enforcement issue you raised. The city council enforcement officers and the police are working together on a number of enforcement practices. I'm not going to say what those are for obvious reasons, but there will be some patrols late at night which will solve some of your concerns. Relating to the write-off of vehicles, the only item which is on the agenda today is to send this out to public consultation. I would very much urge you and anybody else who's got a view on this subject to write back to us, stating your views and concerns, and those views and concerns will be understood and listened to during the consultation process. We're not making any final decision here today. Okay. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. Is it your wish that they be signed as a true record? Everyone's happy? Do you want to go through them page by page for any issues or concerns? Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. There'll be a nothing. Thank you very much. I have received a request for the final item, real-time air quality monitors, to come forward, as officers have got a long way to go home and they've got a 10-year-old daughter waiting for them. Can I have your consent to bring this item forward? Thank you very much. Adrian, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. The matter brings before you is an information report on air quality monitoring. And in brief, currently air quality monitoring across Worcestershire is done by these NOx tubes that we monitor. There's a number around the city, about 37, 38 or so, which is our way of monitoring air quality. It monitors nitrogen dioxide. This report, though, however, changes the landscape for air quality monitoring, and in a nutshell, there will be 10 monitors placed on lampposts, primarily across the city centre in 10 different locations. And we are, at this moment in time, just at the point of agreeing the structural reports and the fitting of those particular locations, which are detailed in the map on Appendix 1. The monitors themselves monitor 7 different parameters, including nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, temperature, humidity, etc. So there's a number of different parameters. And the proposal is, as you'll see right at the back of the report in items in 3.8, there will be a website where this will be published. At this moment in time, I can't give you the detail what that looks like, but the website you will see the map. It will be completely interactive from a public point of view, and it will have modelled information to show the air quality between the centres as well. So there'll be technology built into the website based on the link I've put there with My Air Test. The 10 locations we selected primarily around public health, receptor locations and known risks, and it's for the life of a 3-year project which you very gratefully match funded as a council, so thank you for that. And I open any other questions really about it.
I've got no doubt there are a number of people who've got questions, first of which is Councillor Norfolk.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Adrian, for the report. I can see that Lowersmoor is missing from the set of locations, the intended locations. Is there a particular reason why, given that Lowers Moor was one of the original areas that caused the city to introduce an AQMA?
So the locations we selected are to cover not just nitrogen dioxide risks, which Lowes Moor is identified already as one of the 9 hotspot areas for air quality. We've chosen a wider spectrum of risks to try and not to say look for problems, but to see and to check the levels across the city, not just the known risks. And we know that the Lowes Moor is already identified from the NOx tube information that we already gather. What I'm trying to do here is check those levels using the monitors, and I'm just cautious to be aware that the monitors are not certified for nitrogen dioxide. They're certified for particulate matter, but we will reference the monitors against both government reference monitors, and there is going to be one of those published on one of the spots where we've placed a monitor. So we will be able to scientifically reference the levels in Worcester, and it is to cover the broad church of pollutants, and we are looking very much in future at fine particulate matter, which Sir Chris Whitty spoke about in the 2022 air quality report that he wrote from the government. It's looking at those future risks and fine particulate matter, that being that which is about a 70th of a human hair in diameter or less, so really, really small, and goes deep into your lungs. Those are the risks we should be looking for. So I'm clear that the likes of Lowes Moor, and there are others, the Butts, for example, without naming the whole 9 locations. We know about those locations. We're aware that those need to be dealt with under the existing air quality action plan that we need to do. But this project is looking a little bit beyond that and thinking about future risks that we need to deal with and be aware of. So, and it's to bring attention to that, really. And to give an example, I suppose, from the location. If you look at the location off Rainbow Hill to the east, it's not an area we've not particularly covered. And I want to we know that's an area of fuel poverty, and we want to think about that, about the risks that would come potentially linking to that, domestic fuel burning, etc.
Thank you.
That's a long answer. I do apologise.
No, and it's very clear, and thank you for that. The benefit, I guess, of the website is that it would allow people to have insight into what is happening in those areas. And I know, from my personal history, the fact that we introduced an AQMA because of the pollutants, the NO2 levels at Dalday and in Lowes Moor, which then got expanded to the wider city. We all know the history. It's those pollutants, we've asked drivers not to use that road between certain times of the day. And having that kind of instant feedback about how we're bringing benefit, or how our drivers are bringing benefit to the community by obeying those road restrictions, would be, I think, of use. But
I've got 4 people wanting to ask questions, but can I just seek confirmation if there became a need to change and move some of these locations? That would not be a huge logistical problem, would it? That would be possible.
No is the short answer. There is a small cost behind that, but we do cover that under the project. So yeah, I'd like to leave them there for a short while, 6 to 12 months, see whether that's the case. But given the 3-year timescale, yes, that is a possibility. And there is also the possibility to use them mobilely as well. There is a small battery built into them, so we could use them mobile, for example, on a bike.
And the website will give real-time information, I'm assuming, rather than stored.
Near real time is the best as I can describe, because there's a delay in the checking of the data built into the sensors, and obviously 3G gathering into the database and then pushing it out. And then the modelling computational modelling that will be built onto the website for public to see will all need to be computed. So it's near real time. I think in practice there's about a 5-minute delay, something like that. So you're pretty close, and it will be every few minutes they're recording, and then you'll get a very clear. In the case, let's take a road, for example, during rush hour, you'll get a very clear diurnal path, so big morning and night.
Thank you. As I said, I've got 5 members indicating, and Councillor Wilmore next, then Councillor Hodgson.
Can you just give us a little bit more information about the parameters of the project in terms of linking up with other data sets around public health? So A&E admissions for spikes of respiratory disease and all the rest of it. Is there going to be some talking between data sets to see what the potential impact or legacy is of fluctuating environmental levels over the 3 years?
So the project is funded directly from the DEFRA Air Quality Fund with match funding from yourself. That does not look at public health as a primary aim of the project. But what it does do, it covers the need to look at, in the project brief, we looked at behaviour change to improve air quality. So as part of that behaviour change, in my view, that will include looking at background public health data at the start of the project to see what people's behaviours are, sometime during the middle, and also at the end to monitor. As part of the success profiling that we have to do, we'll have to say whether effectively the project's been successful. That to one side. As part of the air quality management process I've previously described, I have set up detailed discussions with public health and other partners to establish both the short-term measures needed for the air quality action plan and also long-term strategy improvements. And to give an example, Clean Air Night, which is going to be the first one in January this year, we are working with public health to think about what we're going to say about that, using the DEFRA and the Clean Air Night resources to push out a message. It's quite a sensitive message because in winter people need to heat their homes, but also there's a health message as well that it does affect the community health. So we are working with public health to think about that long-term strategy message. And I was on a discussion today about that, to give you an example. So they are regular, they're in place. As to the link to this project, no, there is not a direct link to the data sets currently. I have asked though.
Yeah, thank you, because it's the kind of whataboutery of the project, isn't it? The whole aim of cutting or improving air quality is to hopefully have an impact on health, particularly respiratory health. So it would be a lost opportunity, I think, to not be able to demonstrate the impact or the positive or detrimental of rising or falling air quality over the lifetime of the project.
Agreed. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I've got a very simple question. I noticed one of these is in Hastings Drive, Warndon Villages, which is around the corner from where I live. Why has that location been selected?
Yes, so scientifically that is in the north east of the city. It is in the furthest wind direction of the city. And the theory being, it is picking up any pollution that is created within and before the city, and we are monitoring what happens at that far end of the city. The predominant wind flows from the bottom left of the map up to the top right. If you want a bit of description, that's the predominant wind direction. We're southwesterly, the jet stream, and we've placed it there as near as we can to the edge of the political boundary of the city, but within, to capture that predominant wind direction pollution. And bear in mind that NOx dissipates with distance, particulate matter doesn't.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question, because obviously it is an interesting location, because certainly at rush hour we have long queues to get onto the 5 at Tickford queuing back. So that must be a factor. It also contains the largest industrial business park in the city. So a lot of large good vehicle movements there as well. So I think, you know, you will get a very interesting analysis from that.
Yes, we'll get a number. We won't get the what. So don't forget, particulate matter is a wide church of things that contribute to it. So be it domestic, be it industrial, be it the sea, be it agriculture, all contribute. I know that from, I've been to a research conference recently where the Centre of Birmingham, it's available on WMA's website. You can see how they have broken down particulate matter that is in Birmingham city centre. What I'm interested in though is what's happening in Worcester, and the start is just a number would be really helpful. And yeah, the M5 industry. And to look at, if you look, you will have access also to the wider Worcestershire. I have deliberately placed monitors in industrial sites in other parts of Worcester to look at that very matter. What is the contribution to Worcester, as I have to agriculture?
Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions. Well, I'm very pleased to see Hastings Drive as someone who's walked in there and felt the air. Actually, it felt quite disgusting to be breathing. And down by Gulliver Park, because again, it's an area that's very popular for people to walk to and from a park where you get fresh air and you can taste the air isn't clean there. But I was wondering if any of these spots are near schools, so we'll be able to see the effect of when the schools are closed, and particularly peak times when lots of children are maybe being dropped off and collected, so that the parents might get an idea of their contribution that driving children to and from school, and maybe they'd be better off avoiding it or parking further away and walking in. Is one.
Yes, there are 3 of the locations are deliberately placed near to schools, and in the case of one of them, I think 3 are within near proximity. So the idea through the project really is to then work with those schools about that. The St John's one, for example, down in is near to the Sainsbury's store, which we know is a drop-off. You know, and that, so to have a conversation with them in that location, we felt was useful, as are others. So yeah, and the one you at Gwynnevelt Park is a really another classic example, really, from our point of view, a high transit route, but also other schools and other risk factors nearby. In fact, I think there's a care home nearby that one as well, if I remember rightly. So, you know, we're looking at trying to look at a number of things and target a number of things, from the risk to those who are particularly affected by pollution, but also trying to promote the benefits.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's not a follow-up. It's do we have to run the existing scheme in parallel, as this is just a trial? And you said something about it not being, you know, this or you know, the tubes. Do we have to run those as well, or are we replacing it with this monitoring system?
No, they'll be complementary. So this will run. This has been 30 years. This has been going. Yeah, these are no, they're not mandatory, but they're low cost. They're £3, you know, each, whereas the monitors are 7,000. So they're funded and they're for a life.
My question sort of builds on what Councillor Norfolk was asking earlier on, particularly about Lowesmoor and Doleday. I'm a little bit surprised that we're not doing monitoring at those two particular sites, because they are particularly bad. And I know that the current tube thing, you know, it's basically creating an averaging effect over several weeks, whereas what we're going to get with this real-time information is seeing how changes of behaviour happen. So things like the restricted hours of the traffic on Lowesmoor, when we've had road closures for, you know, we had days where we had like activity days and closed the road. You can see the effect of school holidays and so on. I think that would be really fantastic data to have, to be able to see how things that we do as councillors is actually affecting people's air quality, and actually being able to have that for the first time ever, to be able to have that data. So I was wondering, I understand those decisions have been made, but I wonder who made those decisions? Were any councillors involved in making those decisions? Because, you know, from our point of view, I would have thought it'd be quite good for, you know, not everyone in this room perhaps to be involved, but a few of us to have been consulted on that decision, because I think it's quite a significant issue. And I think, as Elaine has mentioned earlier on, there's a number of sites where people are living in poor air quality. So the fact we're not actually using this fantastic equipment to actually measure in those places, I'm a bit surprised. So, so I guess my question is, you know, perhaps we could have had some consultation with councillors, because we know our areas, I think, quite well generally. So, and can we perhaps review that decision?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Stephens, for your question. Obviously, we had a report back some months ago now, when we were successful with the bid, and pre the bid, there were a number of locations that were put forward for locations of the monitors. Subsequent to that, I believe that WRS have worked with Public Health at the County Council around the potential location of them. And there's obviously this paper, and as Adrian has set out, there is a rationale behind the locations. What I would say is, as much as we probably want to pursue the locations that we've got, it's for members to decide where they go ultimately. This is council funding that's part funding these. So as much as I wouldn't want to derail what's already being planned, and my preference would be to give WRS the time to have them in these locations now for a minimum of whatever Adrian suggests, whether that be 6 months, 9, 12 months. Yeah. As Adrian has said, there's certainly the ability for us to be able to review locations in the future. But what I would stress is that there's quite a bit of work that's already gone in with Public Health around where these locations are. So my suggestion would be not now, but certainly if the locations members are keen for, that we put those onto a list and they're not lost for the next round.
I was going to suggest at the end of this discussion and debate that this item become a standard item on our agenda, because it's going to have updates throughout the year ahead. And I think it might be wise to have this discussed at our next meeting as well, to give us updates on where we are with the process of the rollout of the equipment, and also for us to try and to identify potential future locations for the equipment to be used in the future. As the director has said, it's for members to determine that, but I think the science and the professional advice must be heavily taken into account by members, and I wouldn't want to necessarily question their advice. But I think it's something which we can potentially consider if this is a rolling item for the future, especially with data and information coming forward, which may or may not be informative for us. Okay, do you want to come back?
No, that's fine.
I've got Councillor Alcott and then Councillor Stanley.
Chair, thank you. Yeah, and I think, sorry if I may just comment on that last item. Obviously, it is a very important strategic piece of work, and with the best will in the world, with 35 city councillors, you could find yourself swapping, and there would be no point. So we do need to be strategic, but if we review it, I guess that makes sense. But I just wanted to touch upon, obviously, we've got the action plan here, and also at Worcester, we've got our city centre transport strategy. And I think that they both sort of key into transport and health and emissions. And obviously the County Council will be looking at our TP5, its next strategic transport document. And I know the city struggled to get much back from county on this, and we need to know sort of when their planned consultation is. But I just wondered whether yourself as WRS have received any update, whether it's something we should chase direct with the relevant director at county, because I just feel that we're doing a lot of work, but we're not getting anything back, and we're stuck without them. Yeah, that's a polite version of.
Okay, thank you. WRS act on the City Council's behalf, so it's not WRS in effect. It is the City Council, and I think the Managing Director has set out in a previous. I think there was a question at Council, last Council, wasn't it, around the transport strategy. So we have sent it to the County Council, and they have informed us that they will consider that as part of LTP5 planning, but that's as much as we know.
Thank you.
Chair, thanks very much. You alluded to in a previous answer the 6 to 12 month period why at some point or another the locations could be reviewed and potentially the equipment redeployed. Excuse me. I guess the bit that interests me at this point is the data. How strong is it? What, to me, and I'm not a scientist, but how much, if you like, faith can we have in data gathered from a piece of equipment that potentially has been on site for 6 to 12 months? Now, that may be perfectly satisfactory from the scientist's perspective, but as councillors, we're working with a lot of data routinely to affect change around the city. We're looking for trends. We're looking for things that may guide us, how we come up with proposals for the future of the city. How does that particular point within that 6 to 12 months weigh into there?
It's a difficult one to answer. I mean, how strong is the data, I think, is your question. And I've said already that the monitors will be are MCerts accredited. I took a robust exercise to pick what I think is the best type of monitor for this particular project. And MCerts is the certification system that is being accredited by DEFRA for these type of monitors. So there are at current about 3 or 4 on the market that can do that. So as far as I'm concerned, they are an indicative monitor. They're not reference standard, but they're not a NOx tube either. They're somewhere in between in terms of the standard. In terms of its reliability, it will be QA/QC checked regularly as part of the agreement we have contractually with the provider. And we, WRS, will monitor the data against the data sets we hold to ensure that the data we have is reliable. Obviously, the NOx tube data from a NOx point of view, we have 2 reference type monitors within the county as well. We can reference them against, as well as the other locational data which we have access to via the DEFRA website. So all in all, I'm more than reasonably confident that the strength of the data is reliable and is sufficient enough for us to inform both public health actions, behaviour change, and potentially to include in future research projects. And a 6 to 12 month data set, or the 12-month data set covers a seasonal calendar year. That's kind of would give us a picture what the weather affects air quality, and key, don't forget we're looking at potential climate change here as well. How does climate change also potentially affect that, whether you believe in that or not, for another day. But the impact of climate change, no, exactly. Climate change and air quality are inextricably linked, and the idea basically behind the project is to look at that and just to simply show it, and the website will show that real time. But the key thing, and I get the other point, is what you're saying is, and I have got colleagues here in the room which I've been saying, really, what I want to come back with really is a way of, there's a huge volume of data here that's going to be produced, 27 locations, 10 in Worcester, real-time data, literally every hour, every minute of the day, there'll be something pushed out. It's a lot of information to digest. And my plan is to try and simplify that as best as I can for you, to show you what that looks like in practice, both temporarily, so over time, and in weather, how weather affects it. Those are two different sort of parameters, and there are others I can use as well. But there will be variations, there will be effects. It isn't 100% reliable, but it's pretty good for what we need. For what we need.
If I may check, work out whether or not to use the words you use. You're creating a snapshot or something, in a broader context. Yeah, that was the essence of the point I was trying to drive at, and where that sits then into the data that you've alluded to.
Well, 6 months is a snapshot. 3 years is not.
Okay, thank you everybody who's made a contribution. I must admit, I find some of the science here challenging. I had a chemistry CSE grade 4, so which is not something which I often talk about. But yeah, to put it into simple language is something which I think is necessity for all of us to understand where we're going with this. And I do think this is of sufficient importance for the council and for the electorate, but that we should have this as a standing item on our agenda in the months and years ahead. And initially to review the findings of the first few months, and then to look at what the potential other locations could be in the future. Are we happy to note this report? Feel free.
You're saying it's going to be done by as early in 2024 as possible. What does that mean? Is that quarter one or quarter two, or what are you aiming for?
January.
January. Perfect. Good.
Early in 2024.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Adrian, for coming.
With on the 24th of January for this clean air thing. Is there anything it could be circulated in the weekly bulletin that comes out to all councillors? Anything we could do to support that? An awareness campaign of the new things coming in?
If we take that one away, Chair, and we can liaise with members on that one. But we'll certainly try and.
I think it's something to vote.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Adrian, for go on, Andrew.
Thank you. How many members of the original Task and Finish group are still on this committee or in council? Because I remember back in 2016 when this was being raised first.
I have no idea is the short answer. Don't know if you can help.
Yeah, these monitors were nothing to do with part of the original Task and Finish group. So there was a Task and Finish group set up to look at air quality, but this particular project that we're talking about tonight did not form part of it.
Okay. I'm looking around desperately trying to move on. Are you sure? You're going to let me? Okay. Adrian, thank you very much. Go home. Enjoy the rest of the evening. We now move on to the Licensing Act 2003, review of the Statement of Licensing Policy. Is this Niall? Yes. Yes, over to you, Niall.
Thank you, Chair. Members. Yes, so we're looking now at the review of the Statement of Licensing Policy. So a bit of background to this report, councillors. As you're aware, the City Council is the licensing authority in accordance with the Licensing Act, and as such is legally required to produce and publish a Statement of Licensing Policy at least and then keep it under review every 5 years. This policy sets out the principles that the council applies when carrying out its statutory duties. So it details how licensed premises should operate and informs the council on decisions on whether to issue licenses or not when they're sitting in their capacity as decision makers at licensing subcommittees. It also informs what conditions are appropriate to be applied to licenses, again, should they be referred to the licensing subcommittee. The whole aim is to promote the 4 licensing objectives, which are again all highlighted within the Statement of Licensing Policy itself, and it gives an explanation as to what they are. But you should all know, you've all sat on your licensing training, so hopefully I've explained it to you, so you have a fair grounding or knowledge of the background of why we have this policy in place. Now, the current policy was last reviewed back in 2019, so because of the timing, we're now required, in line with the legislation, to review it again. Interestingly, we have actually revised the policy because within that policy there is a special policy of community impact. So you'll probably remember, for those who've sat on this committee, that I think it was earlier this year we actually approved the revised community of impact policy, having had it reviewed with the statistical information received from the police. So again, it sits within the council statement of licensing policy, an additional piece of information that's contained within it. Now, we've attempted to keep the policy fairly consistent with the other districts within Worcestershire, because it was based on a template that was adopted by Worcestershire Regulatory Service and then put forward to the councils for approval. Obviously, there are district variations, the community of impact policy being one of them. Worcester is the only council within Worcestershire that has a special policy of community of impact. So where it's relevant to change, it's done so, for Worcester City. So what have we done to this policy? There have been a number of changes. They're highlighted within the document in red. Hopefully it's fairly self-explanatory. I'll just run through a couple of the more important ones so that you're aware before it goes out to consultation. It was felt that the introduction didn't actually add to the policy. It's one of those that's been included for years and years and years, and it was a good idea at the beginning because it had a lot of information about Worcester, but again, it needs to be kept up to date. And does it actually add to the policy? It's felt that it doesn't, so we're probably going to remove that as we have done for the gambling policy, which we have in place. There is a section, quite an important section, on Martin's Law. Now it makes reference to it because this is a piece of law which has been introduced following I think it was the Manchester Arena terror attacks, which highlighted sort of flaws in planning and how to react to those sort of incidents. So whilst it hasn't come into effect as yet, it's still sort of in the planning stages. When it does, it's going to place a responsibility on the council to consider that in planning and in licensing possibly. They're not quite sure where that's going to sit and who's going to enforce it yet, but certainly we've made reference to it in our policy because we want to keep up to date with the relevant legislation, and when it's appropriate, we'll bring that information back to this committee. Safeguarding and public safety. So the policy has been enhanced to cover, obviously, safeguarding, particularly women and young girls feeling safe in the nighttime economy. There's a section which has been added to enhance that. Likewise, with public safety, there's a section which has been added to encourage premises to take bleed kits. Obviously, knife crime is very topical. It's something that's increased. Thankfully, not so much in Worcester, but there are licensed premises. It can happen anywhere. So it's another element within the policy to try and encourage those licensed premises and hospitality premises to think about their sort of public safety responsibilities. And again, the equalities section has been updated to try and identify those characteristics so that both licence holders and members of the public can see how the policy sits around that. We're proposing, because of, whilst there are sort of some fairly significant when it talks about Martin's Law, generally the policy has remained the same. There hasn't been a large number of changes. So we're planning to go out to consultation to all relevant stakeholders over a period of 8 weeks, because we think that's appropriate considering the changes that have been made. We are going to utilise the council's communications team so that the consultation is publicised on social media and reaches a wide number of, or a wider audience. The key stakeholders are obviously identified within the report, as well as you as elected members. You are contacted directly, so I'd like to think that you will take the opportunity to have your say. We intend to bring the results back to March. It is quite tight, so hopefully I will have all of those results ready and in a report for you back in March, so that we can then amend the policy, adopt it, and then refer on to full council for its adoption. Those are the matters before you today. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Niall. Just a quick couple of comments from myself first. Obviously, all the major changes are in red. This is going to go out for public consultation, come back to us in March. Can we have at some point more detailed information? I think you indicated this would be okay anyway, about Martin's Law and the changes and the impact it will have. I know we don't know the outlines yet, but when we become aware of it, we will hopefully get that information. Is that right?
We can certainly bring an information report back. I think it does impact on other areas of the council. I think Lloyd looks if he wants to come in.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. Chair, that's probably when more appropriate for Place and Economic Development Committee, because they talk about sort of events and certainly hosting a council. It doesn't prevent us bringing something back here as an information item, but I'd probably just suggest that the principal committee for that particular subject is Petty Committee.
That's probably correct, but I'm looking at the chair of Place and Economic Development. I'm sure there would be no objection to this committee having sight of that document.
Not in my mind at all,
no. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious about this. Well, the knife crime, the stabbing, I'm particularly keen on first aid being available and the effect that could have, because it was a fatal stabbing of a young man in, was it Redditch? I can't remember. Bromsgrove, Redditch. It was awful. And I know his parents were calling for airport-style machine, which I can understand is a huge burden to put on to entertainment. But I was wondering what limitations door staff themselves have when it comes to searching. What sort of procedures can they use to, if they suspect someone is carrying a knife, have they got the support that they need and the training that they need to be able to detect that and be able to repel people that they think are carrying weapons? And when it came to the bleeding control kit, are we offering any form of training, or we recommend, is there anything that the county perhaps is doing about providing these kits or sourcing these kits so that they're available for them to get at a sort of price, or are we just letting everybody do their own thing?
In an answer to that, can you also comment about potential of adrenaline pens for people with food allergies as well in establishments?
I might struggle on the last one, Chair, but certainly can comment on, when it comes to SIA and door supervisors, they are trained, they are fully trained in both prevention, people entering premises that they don't want on. It comes down to the individual hospitality premises, policies and procedures. So depending on the nature of the venue, if it's a restaurant, they'd be less likely to have security staff searching people coming in. But if it's a nightclub, this is where we're encouraging those, they call them knife wands, to identify sort of bladed articles. They can search, policies are in place, so you will often see sort of female door supervisors, male, to search and frisk and try and do that sort of first hand response to stop people coming in that shouldn't be coming in. And where there are people carrying weapons, they are trained to call the police. You know, that is exactly what they're there for. They are to stop and protect people on their premises from those individuals that want to cause harm. When it comes to the police are, yes, the main body for, then they can go one step further with the searches, so they'd be trying to conceal it on their person, either under items of clothing. Now, you talk about training with regards to the bleed kits. It's something that's being supported by the BID at the moment, and myself and Kieran actually attended a meeting with Sam McCarthy at the BID, where she produced actual bleed kits. They have a whole range of information for their premises within the BID, and they are encouraging them. And likewise in Redditch, throughout the county, the same policy is being presented to, and has already been presented to some of the councils. So they are there, and there is a good uptake at the moment. They're not particularly expensive, the bleed kits. And so the hospitality premises are welcoming them, and they're actually taking them on board, which is really good news. So it's certainly a message that's being passed through various channels, through our nighttime economy meetings and the BID. So it's out there, and all of the hospitality premises will see a copy of the policy and will be asked to comment, or invited to comment rather than asked, on those various sections, so they'll see where it sits in. With regards to the adrenaline pens, I can't remember, that wasn't included in there, was it? No, it wasn't. So we probably need to go away and look at that, Chair, and see where that sits. Right. Thank you.
I'm tourniquet trained in catastrophic bleeding through work, because we work with machinery, and it's prototype machinery, and it could trap someone. So and the training I got from St John Ambulance, it was quite scary. You have got very little time to act, so I'm very pleased to see these things out on the streets, because you've got minutes, maybe even seconds to act. So thank you very much.
I have three people indicating, Councillor Norfolk, Hodgson and Stanley, in that order.
Thank you, Chair. And Niall's already mentioned Worcester BID and the work that they're doing already in their Safe Streets campaign, which I think starts this week, or is it next week? Can't quite remember. This week, yeah. It's obviously a sad indictment on society that we have asked for Angela schemes, we have spiking campaigns and knife campaigns. And I'm glad to see particularly 620, 621 and 622. I have no question to ask Niall. I'm just pleased to see those things mentioned.
Niall, are you pleased that Councillor Norfolk is pleased?
Very pleased, Chair.
That's good.
I'm pleased that Niall's pleased. Thank you.
Councillor Hodgson and Councillor Stanley.
Yes, I'm going to make a plea, really. The report obviously makes reference to the cumulative impact aspect, which is something which we have in Worcester. I have two main concerns about it. One is it a means used by that the police like because it makes their life easier? And actually, as a licensing committee, although we don't want law and disorder in terms of the law, we do necessarily, we do want to protect public and make our streets safe. This should not be used as a means of actually preventing new entrants into our market, because there have been some really good, investment opportunities in the city, and would not want to see this policy being used to actually deter those. But obviously, it's our job as a licensing function to make sure that when we implement this cumulative impact on that we do give new entrants a fair crack of the whip in that. And to be fair, some of them we will not know whether they're going to add any more effect until they've actually started operating in that. But provided those new entrances are doing the best practice that we want them to do, I don't think we should be using this policy to deter new entrants to keep our city vibrant and interesting.
I totally agree with you. It shouldn't be used as a means to control a free market in the entertainment industry, but what it should be used as a tool to actually limit crime and disorder. Niall, I don't know if you want to add anything. I know we discussed this in great detail at our last meeting, and we did approve for inclusion in this report, but I don't know if there's anything you wish to add.
Just that, yes, I mean, you'll recall that the policy itself is aimed at vertical drinking establishments. So really the premises that are going on later on into the night, and it's also late night refreshment premises as well. So it shouldn't really deter. It should, in fact, attract the sort of businesses that you want to come to your city centre. So rather than just having a row of late night takeaways selling sort of fried chicken and the like, which then attract people to hover and stay in the town, the policy is set to sort of look at those in more detail. Are they going to add anything to the nighttime economy, or are they not? Certainly when it comes to the police, their crime disorder figures showed that crime had actually gone down in the period from the last time. Obviously we had the COVID as well, and we discussed all of this within the meeting. So they're certainly using it appropriately. They're not looking to deter businesses to come into Worcester City Centre and sort of develop the area. So no, I think it is being used appropriately at the moment.
Yeah, thanks very much. Some sensible amendments. I mean, behaviour changes, threats change, and we have to respond accordingly. The one thing I'm slightly, I'm interested in your response to is under the section in relationship with planning, 21.5. I think I get it, but the interested layman would I think benefit from an explanation of what when it says existing businesses, facilities should not have unreasonable restrictions placed on them as a result of development permitted after they were established, particularly around the word unreasonable. To the interested layman maybe listening in, where does that take the document?
That tends to be where you have a hospitality premises that was there before, for example, a flats or housing development. And then what tends to happen is once those developments are then populated by residents, they look to the premises that is maybe was there originally and in their view is causing a problem. So, the council needs to look at the balance of, what is fair and what is reasonable to those particular premises. Yes, we can deal with them. They shouldn't be causing a noise nuisance, but you shouldn't just put conditions on them just for the sake of it. They need to be evidence-based. But it really is a balancing act for the council when you have those sort of developments that come in long after established licensed premises have already been there.
I totally agree with that. No problem with that whatsoever. It's just, are we leaving ourselves that wiggle room then essentially with the word unreasonable?
You could say that. Yeah, you could say that. Yes, it is. I mean, what you have to bear in mind is that the planning and licensing schemes are two totally separate pieces of legislation. It's very difficult sometimes to marry the two. So whilst we refer to it in there, when it comes to your licensing responsibility, you don't dismiss the planning regime, but you certainly have your own piece of legislation here to deal with in the first instance. And I think that the policy is there trying to say that, yes, you should take into account planning, but it shouldn't be your sole reason for putting conditions on new premises.
Right, the recommendation in front of you is for this to go out to public consultation for a period of, I think it's 8 weeks, is it? And to come back to us in March, so we'll get another opportunity to bite and nibble at this cherry when it comes back to us. Then it will go to council for final approval. So can I seek your approval for this to go out to consultation? Everybody is happy people. Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item 6, which we've already had some discussion about this evening, which is the review of licences and for private Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles with insurance write-offs.
Thank you.
Niall.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is the report on renewal of licences for Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles and its insurance write-offs. And as the Chair has pointed out, you've already had in the public participation section a member of the taxi trade come along and give their views. Personally, I was a little bit confused. On the one hand, the member of the trade was saying that we must keep licences for vehicles that are already licensed, and then on the other hand said that we should take all the licences off them. So hopefully when we come to the consultation stage, he'll be able to put forward his views on which he actually wants. When we talk about this, the background is that the council actually introduced a new Hackney carriage and private hire licensing policy back in September 22. Now, the policy's main focus was that of safeguarding. So, yeah, the public participation section was right, and it made a number of changes to licensing of Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles. So whilst we were looking at the drivers and how we can support making sure that those safeguards are in place, we also touched on vehicles. Now, one of the changes was the introduction of a new rule that basically the council wouldn't grant a licence in respect of any vehicles that had previously been graded as a category A, B, C or S write-off. So if they've been previously written off, then any new vehicles coming onto the fleet wouldn't be licensed. Now, at the time, it's always difficult looking back, and if any members were actually sitting on that committee, we were all sort of under the impression that the council is aware that we'd already had a number of vehicles that were category S write-offs that have been graded, category C or S write-offs, but wanted to stop licensing any new ones coming onto the fleet. So we'd identified that, yes, those vehicles were already licensed, but moving forward with the safeguarding role, we're going to stop anyone, so rather than just taking the chance. The council did recognise that it needed to be fair to those vehicle licence holders who were already licensed, who may be invested in a vehicle on the understanding that actually it was suitable and it had been already passed by the council as a licensed vehicle prior to the policy change. And that way they wouldn't have to face the financial burden of replacing their vehicle immediately as soon as the policy came in. Now, the intention was that the new policy would lead to a gradual phasing out of those vehicles for Hackney carriage and private hires over a period of time. So they will come to the natural end of their life as they're being licensed. Part of that, they are being checked on a twice yearly basis at the council's appointed testing station. So these vehicles have been deemed safe to be on the road, and they are currently being tested every 6 months. However, because of the way the policy was worded in respect to renewals, those vehicles that had already attained a licence before the new policy was implemented found that when it came to licence renewal, they were actually captured by this policy now, which meant that they couldn't licence them, or rather, they couldn't be determined by officers, which meant that they needed to be referred to the licensing subcommittee. So we've identified in the report that there's probably somewhere in the region of about 30 vehicles that certainly up to this point need to go to committee. So rather than put them all forward to committee at that point, we wanted to get the decision from this committee and the trade to make sure that we were going in the right direction. And that was the intention of the policy when it was introduced. So we've sort of held them back, and they have been issued temporary plates. They can continue to legally drive on the road as licensed vehicles until the council has determined those applications, which we intend to do one way or the other. If there is a policy change and it's agreed by council, then they can continue. If the policy change, for example, isn't agreed by this committee or by members, then they will need to go to a licensing subcommittee, and we have that in place in January to determine all of those applications. So certainly the drivers that are out there at the moment aren't being disadvantaged. So the question is what's happening? They are still being checked. So in fact, they're being checked more stringently by officers. So there's also a visual check being taken of those vehicles to make sure that they are still suitable to be licensed. So what are we intending to do? So we're looking to amend the wording contained within the policy in respect of renewals of licences to be used as hunting carriage and private hire vehicles, to make it clear that if they had already been classed as a category C or S write-off at that point in time, that it first became licensed by the council, then the relevant vehicle can be renewed. So that's what the wording of the policy is saying. So we're not looking to change our policy to allow any further vehicles. So any new vehicles that are presented to the council, we will stand fast and say the policy is in place. You know, we are only looking at those vehicles that are already licensed, and of course they have sort of, you know, legal rights under that licensing scheme. We're looking to go out to a fairly short targeted consultation of 4 weeks because of the timescales that are involved. And we were going to bring all of the results back. Again, we'll be targeting the trade themselves because there seem to be differing views, and also other relevant parties, such as members' views as well. And I think they mentioned the county council as part of school contracts will certainly be asking their views as well. So certainly that targeted consultation will take place should it be approved this evening. And then the results we brought back, because of the timescales, it was initially identified that come back to the chair and the director for initial view and see whether it's appropriate to bring it back to committee or not. So that really is the crux of the matter. That's why this report is before you today. It's for you to consider whether it's appropriate to go into consultation on the policy change to allow those vehicles that are already licensed and have probably been for a number of years to continue to be licensed until they come to their end of their natural life. Councillor.
Okay, thank you. I want to make my position absolutely clear. I think our policy is the correct policy, and we should not be given a licence to any new vehicles which have been subject to write-off. I think that's the right thing to do, and I would support that to the end. What I think we've got is the problem of unintended consequences, which none of us expected, which was potentially 30 or 40 vehicles potentially losing their ability to operate very, very quickly. I believe what we've suggested is the right policy to actually resolve this immediate problem, which allows us the opportunity to have a consultation and potentially change our policy in short time to enable us to actually give our officers the ability to give the licence as they see fit. All these vehicles will be inspected to make sure that they are safe for public use, and I think that's the most essential part of this policy. I've got one person indicating, Councillor Stephen.
I don't disagree with what you've just said, Richard. My only slight concern is that if you ask a whole lot of people who are not experts to make a decision, you might end up with a decision which you might not necessarily think it might not end up being a particularly good solution. So I wonder, in terms of the consultation about who we are going to be consulting with, because if you're going to consult with people whose livelihood is based on this and so on, of course they're going to say, oh, it's absolutely fine and so on. So is there anyone we can think of in that consultation process who could be like an expert, like an automotive engineer, or some sort of statement we can get from somewhere that would actually give us some comfort that we are making the right decision, that we're not taking any risks and so on? I don't know who that could be, but somebody somewhere might be able to say, right, it'd be great if we had an expert who could give us an opinion. I don't know who that would be, but
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, whenever it comes to sort of vehicle licensing policy, we always include VOSA. We work with them sometimes on our enforcement evenings. They are the experts. They are the vehicle experts. So I don't know the acronym. I think it's the Vehicle Operating Standards Authority Agency. So yes, they will. But whether they respond or not, we can ask them to, and we always sort of copy them in. Or maybe I could have a conversation. Maybe I could have a conversation with them beforehand and sort of ask them to actually put in a formal response to the consultation, so that it can satisfy members as to how those vehicles that are currently licensed, the safety standards, and what they've had to go through to get back on the road, and also give some sort of clarity as to inform the policy as to whether it's going in the right direction.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I was wondering if it's possible to have a brief idea of what the categories actually are, what that actually means. But maybe not now, but maybe, because the other thing I was going to ask is, of the 25% of the fleet, could you break down which categories the vehicles are in? Because I think that would be quite useful for us to know what level this, I mean, write-off sounds quite an extreme thing, but we know that they're safe and they're being checked to be safe. So I think that's reasonable to know what these actual write-offs are about. Do we know what other regulatory services are doing? You know, are we just going to be, if we ban up these vehicles, which I think, you know, I think we shouldn't have insurance write-offs. It's not, the public won't feel confident about that. I wouldn't feel confident about knowing I got into a vehicle that was an insurance write-off. So are we going to be, are they just going to take them off and sell them to other regulatory, or is everybody adopting a similar sort of policy, as far as you know?
I'll answer the last question first. Certainly within Worcestershire, yes, it's been identified. That's how we are aware of it. I think it's already been approved in Redditch very recently, so they have gone through this exercise and they have already approved it, so that it only applies to new vehicles, and those existing licence holders can continue. With regards to the category breakdown, rather than bring it to another meeting, I've got the government website up, which has got the different types of categories. So category A is cannot be repaired, so it's off the road. Category B is the same, cannot be repaired, so they're off the road. Category C can be repaired, but it would cost more than the vehicle is worth. So using the vehicle, you can use the vehicle again if it's repaired to a roadworthy condition. So you tend to find that insurance companies, certainly for newer vehicles where there is substantial panel damage, sometimes it's more expensive to repair through their own sort of authorised repair dealerships than it is to actually pay out the cost of the vehicle. That doesn't mean that the person can then buy it back and have it repaired themselves at another garage that is more than competent to actually repair the vehicle to a suitable and safe standard. Category D states that it can be repaired and will cost less than the vehicle's worth, but other costs, such as transporting the vehicle, may take it over the vehicle's value. So again, it all comes down to the insurance costs to repair. So it can be used again if it's repaired to a roadworthy standard, which they all are. So if they're back on the road and they've got these categories on, they are to a roadworthy standard. Category N, now of course we haven't included this because this can be repaired following a non-structural damage. So this is a scratch or a dent in a bumper, so it's repaired and put back on the road. But again, insurance companies are very quick these days to write vehicles off, certainly older ones, you know, where again it's the value sort of outweighs the repair outweighs the value. And category S is it can be repaired following structural damage. You can use the vehicle again if it's repaired to a roadworthy condition. Now, you asked the question about can we give you an indication of what vehicles are written off. I tried to do this piece of work, obviously, before this committee, and it came up against a couple of internal issues around sort of the recording. Because there wasn't a need to record this information previously, it wasn't being recorded. So once this issue was highlighted, I started going back through logbooks, and certainly when it comes to the information that we gathered, there are gaps. So certainly moving forward, and since we've identified this, every renewal is being checked thoroughly on the logbook, and we're making a note of the category of damage, but we wouldn't be in a position to bring back the current fleet and the makeup of certainly how many vehicles in the category of write-off at the moment, I'm afraid. Maybe in a year's time.
Okay. Councillor Cross?
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate the problem of lack of data. Following up on what Councillor Stevens was saying, we have how many licensed repair authorities for private hire and for taxi or hackney carriage vehicles? Because it's a different classification, isn't it? And it's a more stringent test. Would there be somebody who from one of those sites who could help members to understand the amount of care that goes into actually making sure that we don't get dangerous cut and shut vehicles back in service. That actually there is rigor in the process, because when they're inspected, obviously you get a good idea, are all the seams straight, etc., where they need to be, that sort of thing.
I think the question you're trying to ask is, rather than how many authorised repair dealerships there are, it's our approved testing station, isn't it? The council's approved testing station. We have one at the moment, and that is Gemini. They are the council's approved testing station for the purposes of safety. They have qualified examiners who look at the vehicle, and they do look at the structural of the vehicle to make sure they're safe, because as we know, people could have accidents and then not tell anybody and just get them repaired themselves and present them to the council then as a vehicle it may not have even gone through sort of the correct channels. So they certainly look at chassis, is it? Sorry, this is where my poor knowledge of vehicles comes in.
I'm better at this.
Yeah, the integrity of chassis and other structural damage. It's certainly part of the MOT. If it's highlighted on the logbook, they can see it, and they certainly look to see if there's been any sort of movement since. And they also carry out, as I say, that test twice a year. So they're looking at all vehicles twice a year, and that includes that's every vehicle that's licensed at the moment. So anything where there is an issue, if there are accidents, it's brought to our attention, and then they come under sort of further scrutiny, certainly from the licensing team, to go out and have a look to make sure that they're repaired to a suitable standard. But that's with the advice of the experts.
Andrew, would you like to see a copy of the examination process, so what's actually examined?
I think it would be helpful to give members who are facing a decision, basically, what's the sort of checklist, what's the sort of parameters, and then the understanding that if a vehicle is substandard, the information about that vehicle being substandard goes not only to the operator, but also to the regulatory service. So we know this vehicle is not ticketed.
Okay, can we get that information circulated?
I can certainly have a go.
Yes.
No, there isn't, but it's not something we've been asked for before, so I need to go back and think about how that's going to be presented. Certainly by way of an information email. I receive a monthly report from the garage of all the vehicles that are tested and the faults that are found. That probably isn't what we're looking for here. No. But certainly any that have been, we have that as well. Yeah, that isn't a problem. No.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just something triggered by something Councillor Costa. There isn't really that much I think you could probably do about it if somebody did have an accident and took it off to be repaired themselves, but presumably an astute tester might notice if he sees or she sees a repair. But I was just wondering, when we've seen some drivers at licensing subcommittees, and they've had offences for not reporting things. Do insurance companies report to you if a taxi is damaged or gets repaired? Is a taxi driver operating the vehicle supposed to report to you? And if they don't, are they going to be fined for that?
It comes down to the insurance companies themselves. When there is damage to a vehicle, of course, if it's the individual, not many people have got the finances to put them right. So they rely on their insurance. That's what it's there for, to repair the vehicle. And if it's damaged to such a standard that it needs to be written off because it's structural, then there's a national database that the actual garage testing station has to enter that information onto. And that's how it ends up on the logbook. So MOT testing stations and the like, and repair centres are all part of a national network that are legally required to report that information. So if there is an unscrupulous driver or owner who damages the vehicle and has a friend who tries to repair it, it would come to light, because the testers go underneath the vehicle. They have ramps, they have their lights, they look at the chassis of the vehicle. And if there are creases or dents or anything, or if it isn't straight, then questions will be asked. They will highlight it and bring it to our attention for us to then maybe request that it's tested up at VOSA, and they are the experts. They are the government's appointed body to look at vehicles and the safety of vehicles. So that would be the natural route.
I'm not sure if all members around this table received an email from Councillor Riaz regarding this issue. He raised one significant issue which I haven't had an opportunity to raise with Niall in advance, but I would like some clarification about. He says that in his email that Worcester Regulatory Services officers have been calling drivers up from private numbers and informing them that their vehicle is no longer fit and licences will not be issued. Can you imagine the distress and alarm this is causing in the run-up to Christmas to drivers? This is certainly not what we suggested would happen, and I'm seeking confirmation and clarity from you that is not happening.
That isn't happening. When you say they're calling from private numbers, I'm assuming it's their works phones that they're using in the mobile numbers. They are contacting drivers. So what's happening is drivers are putting in their renewal paperwork. It's been identified that those vehicles are a category S write-off. So officers are contacting them and explaining what is happening. You know, there is at no point are they saying they can't use the vehicle. In fact, we're looking at, and we were looking at sort of putting procedures in place, hence the temporary plates to identify those vehicles. But yes, but they will be concerned because it is an issue that has been highlighted. So it is trying to be explained to some of the drivers. The message probably isn't getting across to some of them. They probably don't understand the nuance of what's actually happening with the council and the fact that it's a policy change, because as far as they're concerned, it has presented in the report. They presented the vehicle for licensing previously, and now we're saying, well, actually, it doesn't meet policy. It's a delicate situation, but certainly not how it's being portrayed.
Yes.
I think there's just a misunderstanding because the officers that are contacting them, I think there is probably only one at the moment who tends to focus on the Worcester area, and I've listened to the conversations, and she explains in detail what has happened and what we are doing and what we need to do. What we have done, though, is, yes, we are asking for an additional check on those vehicles to come up, just to ensure that in case there's any criticism that we're allowing these vehicles to continue and they're not safe, as well as the Gemini check. Officers are doing that sort of visual inspection to make sure that there isn't any obvious damage to the vehicles by way of dents, scratches, bumps, you know, that indicate that maybe they're not fit for purpose. So that is what's happened. So hopefully I'll allay those fears.
Yes.
With regards to the personal number, it's probably just
A number withheld.
well, even when we call from the landline, it will come up with a telephone number. So not necessarily mobile numbers. We have sort of integrated phone systems. It will come up with a telephone number.
I'm satisfied that that's not happening. Certainly wasn't any instruction from myself, or I'm aware that you've been doing what we've been discussed outside the meetings. So I'm quite happy with the process as it is.
Yes, again, this was something I think we raised at the taxi forum, didn't we? We discussed it with the representatives for them to go and pass the message on to the drivers, what was happening. This has been discussed in detail at the taxi forum. So I'm surprised that information hasn't got back to Councillor Riaz. I think it's just a knee-jerk reaction from a couple of drivers who probably don't understand the process or didn't.
I think it's misunderstanding rather than malicious. So
No,
okay. This is going out for a short period of consultation, which will come back to the Vice Chair, myself and the Director for determination. Are we happy to proceed on this basis? We are. Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item 7, the review of sex establishment licensing policy. It's what we've all been waiting for. Niall, over to you. You're the expert on sex.
Chairman, it seems to be a night of policy changes. Again, this is a review of the sex establishment licensing policy. Now, as a council, we are empowered to license premises. Originally back in when the Act was enacted in 1982, these were your sort of sex cinemas and sex shops. And then the amended section, which was brought in 2014, which brought in sexual entertainment venues such as lap dancing establishments. So the council is empowered to issue licences quite legally to these premises, most of which have been licensed with the council for a number of years. So they are trading quite happily. So we have a policy in place. It's attached to the report. The policy was introduced in 2014, and it hasn't really undergone a review since that time. So certainly in our discussions, and our chairman and Vice Chair briefing, we felt it appropriate when we're looking at all policies of the council to bring it back to this committee for review. Now, we're not proposing to make any drastic changes to the policy, as it seems to appear to be fit for purpose. But again, that's the purposes of the consultation, to see whether, as the council, we're missing anything. There are one or two amendments, the level of fines that can be undertaken on premises when they're found to be breaching the legislation. What else is in there? Again, we've removed the introduction. Again, it's felt that it doesn't add anything, as we have done with other policies. We've also added in an extra section, or rather just highlight or indication to the National Ugly Mugs. It says it's an organisation that actually looks after the interest of those persons within the sort of that trade, certainly those lap dancers and people, sexual entertainment venues, looking at policies and procedures to help assist them and keep them safe. When we did an equality impact screening, it identified that yes, I mean this very policy, by its very nature and what it's proposing to regulate, actually goes further, and it identified that a full equality impact assessment should be undertaken. The proposal is to undertake that alongside the consultation, provided members are happy, and again that will be presented back with the findings at the time it's presented back to committee for consideration. I'm happy to try and answer any questions on this, if you have any.
Councillor Lawrence, then I've got a comment.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Do the participants who are working, shall we say, do they have the rights to refuse without, just withdraw the business? Like you could, if a store, you could say, I'm not selling that goods. If they're not comfortable with the situation, are they quite within their rights to just withdraw their services?
I would say that they are. I'd say that the premises themselves, so when we talk about sexual entertainment venues such as lap dancing establishments, they have security staff. They have policies and procedures in place. We have our policy in place, but they'll have working practices as well to look after their entertainers. Yes, there are policies. I'm aware that they are on there. And there's also CCTV within all over the establishments to sort of safeguard their employees. So yes, it's certainly in there.
This is coming on to the subject which I was going to mention under this. I'm conscious, very conscious, that most of the licensing legislation which exists regarding sex establishments is about protection for the public rather than protection for the people who are working in these establishments, which is why I've raised with officers the need to gain publications from National Ugly Mugs in there, which is starting to become a national recognised charity to support sex workers to protect them from some unsavoury clients. So I think that we do need to make sure that there is information about employment rights and protection, as well as other areas for those who are performing, which comes under the issue of the literature which we are requiring to be installed in these premises. I think there's no way any of us will want to make moral judgments about whether these establishments should exist or not. What we do want to do is make sure they're safe for both the customers and the performers. Councillor Stephen.
Yeah, on a similar vein, obviously 2014 was probably quite a long time ago, really, and things change. My question is about trafficking and exploitation and modern day slavery and all those sorts of things. I wonder whether that is also, whether this is an opportunity to write something into this policy to help to detect it and to find it and to work within the licensing framework to knock it out, basically. Is there an opportunity to put some of that in here or not? Is it already there? Fine. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's going out to consultation, so anything that you feel appropriate that's missing, that should be included. And I'm not sure.
I'm sure I've read it.
That there is certainly within the licensing policy. I'm not sure about this. I'm going to quickly go through. Yeah, I mean,
if it isn't there, that's going to be part of the consultation response from this committee.
Yeah, the policy itself does have the conduct to the management of sex establishments. There's a whole section in there regarding how the premises should be managed, and basically the safeguarding of their performers. So it is in there, but if there's anything missing that you think, in particular with regards to modern day slavery, if you highlight it with us, we can certainly look to include it. Or we'll be also asking sort of women's groups and anybody who's in safeguarding to comment and, you know, guide the council to say, well, this is missing, this is obvious, you know, you should, because you say we're not the experts, we are the ones who actually administer this piece of legislation and issue the licenses, so it needs to be right. I think the equality impact assessment will certainly highlight anything that's missing along sort of our equality duty, the public sector equality duty, which is very important at the moment. I know there are a number of local councils that probably haven't gone very far under the public sector equality duties, and they have been criticised, so we're certainly not going to get caught out on that.
I think it's fair to say that we can record in our minutes that we would certainly wish to see inclusion within the final document, anything relating to modern slavery within the final piece of documentation. Is there any other comments from anybody else? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hodgson.
Yes, I'll go on. Obviously, our licensing policies have to keep up to date to trends and that. And I know there are major retailers who are now selling sexual well-being products. And some of them at the moment are just selling them online. But obviously they may well want to start selling them in their retail outlets and that. Not obviously the same scale as a dedicated sex shop, but nevertheless want to sell products of that particular purpose. How would our licensing policy deal with that if a non-sex shop decided they wanted to sell a limited range of such items?
Thank you. Yes, this has already happened. It comes down to the percentage of goods in the store. Believe it or not, there are other low-cost budget shops available. I think Poundland ventured into offering certain items on their shelves for adult sexual pleasure. But of course, because of the very small number of shelf space that it was taken up, it didn't fall into the realms of a sex shop. So there are guidelines as to when they actually become their businesses predominantly selling items that are covered by this particular piece of legislation. So there's nothing stopping your mainline retailers just putting them on their shelves, but it's when it becomes part of, or rather the majority of their business, then they can fall in the realms of being licensed.
Am I right in my belief that only a licensed sex shop can sell R18 videos, which is only accessible in licensing shops? So, but they could sell anything else but that. Yeah, okay. Councillor Lawrence, and then I'm going to call it an end.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that subject, would they be expected to or mandated to advise people that they are entering an area where they might see that sort of, you know, if you're walking through a shop with a child and you come across that, I would be quite annoyed about it. And, you know, it's one thing for an over 18 to actively go into that area. Are they marked, or do they not required to be marked if they're not in a licensed premises? Is it up to the...
My understanding, and I will confirm if I'm wrong, based on previous experience of having sex shops come in before us, but the only establishment which is required to have an 18 notice on the door is licensed sex shops. Any other retailer selling any other kind of product is not required to have that restriction. Am I correct? Yeah, that's, yeah. If the product is age restricted, that is a different issue. Yes. I think members have got lots of issues and questions on this issue, and maybe if and when we have another application to come forward, that licensing subcommittee could be oversubscribed. So it's okay. Can I see this is going out for consultation, and it will come back to us in March for another. I was going to say bite of the cherry, but that's not appropriate language to use for another discussion. So, are we happy for that to happen? Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Oh.
Quickly moving on.
Yes, quickly, yes. Very quickly moving on to proposed licensing and environmental health fees and charges. I'm not. Is that you again, or was it Niall? Lloyd.
Chair, I'm happy to introduce the report, but I'm going to swiftly hand over to Kieran to run through some of the details. So these are the proposed fees and charges for next year, for 24-25. And as members will be aware, it will come to this committee first, and the report's asking members to approve the undertaking of a consultation in respect of fees, in respect of the taxi fees, but then basically to approve the draft fees and charges onto Income Management Committee, where that committee will debate them, and then subsequently will go on to council as part of budget setting. So what the report has done, it's set out in the appendix the proposed list of fees and charges, and we've identified those charges where we feel are above inflation, and there's some narrative against those to try and explain those away to members, but happy for Kieran to run through some of the detail, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Is that working? Yeah. Okay, so as Lloyd has set out, just a couple of things to take to note is that licensing remains a reserved matter, and therefore the council can't make a profit on licensing fees or environmental health fees, and therefore they need to be cost neutral. So whenever we look at these fees and work out a proposal for any percentage increases, we're always looking at what was the cost to the council and how much income has been generated from those fees. So the annual review has taken place. The review has resulted in a proposal to increase the council's licensing, food, health and safety and pollution control function fees and charges broadly in line with inflation. So that's around 6% and rounded up. It's worth noting that there's some fees under the Licensing Act and the Gambling Act that are statutory fees, and we can't actually change those or increase those. So those are also noted in Appendix 1. Other environmental fees such as stray dog fees and private water supplies have been increased by 6.8%, and that's in line with inflationary pressures as well. Animal licensing, kennelling, scrap metal fees have been increased to ensure cost recovery. The animal licensing regime came into effect in 2018, and as a council, we've never actually increased those fees since its introduction. So we've done a lot of work in the background on these fees, and we've noted an 8% increase on these fees, and that's probably one of the highest. But we think that fairly reflects the work that WRs have been doing in this field and the fact that they haven't been increased for that long. But we also have started to do a lot of proactive enforcement in this area as well. The scrap metal fees have been increased by 5%, and this is the same across all of the districts in Worcestershire, and that again is based on the amount of work that we've been doing in that area. These have also been frozen actually since prior to the pandemic, so it's the first increase we've done. Officer charges for enforcement and administrating health certificates have also been reviewed and increased on a cost recovery basis. So again, based on the fees that the salary fees that we've had to incur as a council. Pavement licensing fees have remained the same at £100. This is because when this scheme was actually introduced during the pandemic, that was the fee that was set by government. This has actually been re-looked at, and there is some new legislation coming in where a new pavement licensing regime is going to be implemented, so that might change during the course of the year. And that is the only real changes. There is one thing to note, Chair and members, that on page 117 there is a fee that actually shouldn't be in there, which is the electric vehicle admin fee. That fee has actually never been implemented, so that should have been removed from the appendix. Okay, happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Hodgson first, and Councillor Cross.
Yeah, a very simple one. I've seen these reports before, and what I think will be very useful, if you remember, will be we must know how many times these fees are actually charged. So actually the number of occurrences against each licence fee would actually be quite useful, because it would also indicate, you know, when we need doing beat changes, whether something has an actual impact on revenue or not. And also, it's also a good year-on-year indication as well, to see how activity in terms of licensing activities are changing throughout the city.
Thank you. Councillor, we have obviously the number of licences that have been issued throughout the year. I'm not sure if that's something that we want to suggest in the next report.
Can we take that one away and give it some thought, Chair?
It's a very good point, because I was going to raise something similar regarding the issue of dog breeding. I'm aware of just how few licenses there are in the Worcester area, and I just don't believe that's an accurate figure. And I believe there's a lot of illegal dog breeding taking place, and some very unsavoury characters doing the work, who are not known for their love of animals. It does force me to ask the question about what ability we have to enforce licensing, but that's a different issue. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much for this report. I mean, good to see how things compare. What would be handy is what you gave verbally, the information about, so when, with these categories, when they were last revised, that would be a really useful figure to see. So yes, it's, as Councillor Hodgson said, it'd be useful to see, is this actually an area where revenue happens? Is this an area of business, or is it fairly dormant? Similarly, also, you know, the picture as to how things are in terms of costs, how the trends have been. Thank you. When last put up, that sort of thing. Yep.
Okay. We'll take that away and look at the format for future years. Councillor.
Yeah, Chair, I was just going to make a point, actually. We can certainly, you know, expand the narrative around reports like this to talk about when fees were last changed. I think what I'd say from an income point of view is that, again, Income Management Committee will receive income monitoring reports where they will look at corporately, you know, at income across the council. So I think putting it in as part of a fees and charges report may sort of steer the conversation away from actually, is it a fair and reasonable charge to be applying? And as Kieran has said, a lot of the licensing charges, they're either set by government or they're worked out on a full cost recovery base. But we can definitely go away and have a look at how we can improve for next year.